Our scripture reading today is 1 Corinthians 2, 1 through 5. And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. The word of the Lord.
We're going to be in Matthew 14 this morning. If you have a Bible with you and want to turn with us, now's a great time to do that. We'll also have all the scriptures up on the screen as we go through together. Matthew chapter 14. This morning we're reading a story that helps us to see the general character of the Christian life through the lens of a time of crisis. It shows us what it looks like to live in a chaotic world, how we're called by someone who loves us and can save us, and then what the pattern often looks like of responding to that call. So let's get started. We're going to read verses 22 to 25 this morning. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. We'll pause there. It's interesting. Our story almost makes a pit stop here before it even gets into the meat of the story. It almost puts you on a hiatus before we really get going. This passage comes right after the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus miraculously multiplies a few loaves and fishes to feed 5,000 people. That's what immediately means in verse 22. That word there's basically setting us up with this mental image of Jesus and the disciples feed all the people, they gather the leftovers, they figure out what to do with it, and then Jesus helps the disciples get in the boat, he pushes them off into the lake, he disperses everyone who's come to hear the teaching, and he goes and seeks solitude. That's where we're taking a quick detour, or at least it can feel like one, as Jesus goes to a place of solitude and silence, being with God in prayer. Because we know, as we get further into the story, that the drama of the moment, the big thing happening, is that at the very same time that Jesus is going and doing this, the disciples are struggling. They're trying to bring the boat to heel out in the middle of the lake. Jesus is calmly praying, taking a time of stillness and solitude with God while they are fighting the wind and the waves. And I think it's actually kind of a beautiful way to start the story, because it serves as a kind of echo for our story when it comes to our relationship with God. From our perspective, the perspective of the people in this story that we're supposed to identify with, the disciples, they are in a place of chaos and hardship and difficulty. The passage starts talking about how they're being beaten by the waves. Their boat is being buffeted and tossed side to side on the sea. It talks about, strangely, how they had moved a surprisingly far distance from the shore, despite the fact that the wind was against them. It's kind of talking to the chaos of the situation. They're not really sure which way is which. They're trying to get out, but they're not really sure what's going on. It's getting into this general sense of confusion and chaos that they feel like they have no control, and they are constantly having to fight to keep on course. And if we're being honest with ourselves, at some point, that's where each and every one of us end up in our stories as human beings. Hurried and harried, dismayed and distraught, confused and concerned about the world around us and about ourselves. Our story is one that begins in brokenness. And as Christians, we think that there's a reason that the world is messed up around us the way that it is. And we believe that the reason is us. There was a letter that was sent out in the early 1900s by the London Times, which posed the question to a number of of prominent authors: what is wrong with the world today? One Christian author wrote back, "Dear sir, I am yours, G.K. Chesterton." What Chesterton was pointing out was that the world is messed up because we're messed up. The world is messed up because we're part of it. And we are the source of that messed upness, both individually in the ways that we mess stuff up in our lives every single day, but as a group, as a people, in an even larger sense. As Christians, we believe that we were created by a loving God who made the world good and placed us in it as caretakers and stewards and as His friends. But we didn't want to be the children of God. We didn't want to be the stewards of God. We didn't want to even be the friends of God. We wanted to be God. And so we rebelled. We chose our way instead of His. The Bible calls this type of rebellion sin, and we've been doing it ever since. Step by step, united as a species in moving away from God more and more and into our own desires and designs. And the reality is we aren't as good or as smart or as capable as we think we are. And so without God's merciful intervention, we just break the world more and more and more in 1,000 different ways. But the good news within this bad news is that God does intervene. Jesus comes to them in the middle of the storm. The Quaker poet John Greenleaf Whittier in 1872 wrote, "Breathe through the heats of our desire, thy coolness and thy balm. Speak through the earthquake, wind and fire, O still small voice of calm." In the midst of our chaos, out on the storm with the disciples, in whatever that looks like in our lives from day to day, Jesus intervenes. God intervenes. In the wind and the storm and the brokenness, God sends a messenger who comes to us out of a place of calmness and stillness and peace, and He brings that peace with Him. It's Jesus. And just like Jesus comes into the picture here in our passage, it says, in the fourth watch of the night in verse 25. That's around 4 a.m. It's the middle of the night. It's the darkest it's going to get. Just like Jesus doesn't wait for the disciples to figure it out and get to shore or to get through the night and see what was on the other side, Jesus comes to us in the middle of our trouble. As the Bible says at one point, while we were still sinners, Christ dies for us. When we're stuck in the middle of all the junk around us, Jesus comes for us. He chooses to not leave us alone. So as Jesus enters the picture here in what the disciples are going through, we're going to read about how He calls us to respond to His presence. Let's read verses 26 and 27. But when the disciples saw Him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." We all, as human beings, need to be humbled once in a while, in some way, shape, or form. And I think I'm self-aware enough to know that I maybe need this more than most people do. I am the kind of person who has a right answer for every situation and question. I am that way professionally, and sometimes to my family's frustration, I am that way in my private life too. And it makes sense. Personality tests have been telling me that I'm like this for 15 plus years. I'm a C on the disc. All my Strength Finder strengths are in executing and strategy. I'm an Enneagram 1 who famously, our motto is, there's no such thing as perfect, but we'll never know till we try. Why am I bringing all this up? This is seem a little off to left field. Well, it's because of this. The disciples think that Jesus is, our best modern word here is a ghost. And this week, after hours of research and digging into every resource I could possibly find, I could not for the life of me figure out why. What is going on? Why do they think he's a ghost? I looked into ancient Near Eastern views on ghosts and how the dead would maybe stick around afterwards. I looked into the Greek word. It's phantasma, in case you were wondering. And in the whole Bible, it appears only in Matthew and Mark's version of this story. This is the only place we find it. We can't go looking somewhere else for context. I pulled out all my commentaries and my lexicons and my so on and so forth. Moment of deep and abiding confession, I even thought about using AI. That's how you know when I'm down bad. I consider AI as a possible solution to a problem. That's just getting to know me as a person. Anyway, I kept feeling like the passage is telling me something here. There's something that it's trying to get across, that they look at Jesus and they think they see a ghost. And I just can't hear it. I can't figure it out. And so I started talking to people about my frustration. And one of the people I told was Thea, my daughter, about it. And she said something along the lines of, maybe they were just really afraid and so they thought they saw a ghost because ghosts are scary. Well, folks, that's about the best I can give you this morning. I realized, after all of my intellectual digging, maybe that's really what it is that it shows us how scared they were. It shows us how worried they were, that they look out and immediately assume, I'm seeing the thing that is scary in my mind. Simple as that. But thankfully for them, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Jesus is not just another source of fear and panic in the midst of the storm. He is the fix for fear. He is the answer for anxiety. He is the death knell for the despair that they were feeling. Jesus walks out to them in a way that no normal man could, and he gives them a command. It can come across as just a statement, but the way it's framed here, this is a command that he is giving them. Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. I think it's very intentionally phrased in the exact order and pattern that we find it in. See, in the Greek, that entire sentence is 4 words and a particle, but we're going to ignore that. It's 4 words this morning. 1 word for take heart, 1 word for do not fear, and 2 words in the middle for it is I. And the way the sentence is structured, it's structured in a kind of Jewish way to say the things on the front and the back are dependent on the thing in the middle being true. It's saying you can take heart, you cannot be afraid, and the reason you can do those things is that I am who I am. Jesus says, because of who I am, you can take heart and you cannot be afraid because of who I am. The command and challenge that Jesus is issuing to the disciples here is the one that he issues to each and every one of us when we are lost in the chaos of life. We look around in the storm and he says, you don't have to fear. You can be courageous. You can find courage in the middle of your problems because Jesus is who he says he is. And that's the question. That's the challenge. Do I believe that? Do I really believe? Because what Jesus is saying here is that we do not need to worry, no matter the hardship that faces us, because of who he is, because of what he did. Because he has already faced the hardest time possible. He embraced separation from God on the cross so that we never need to be alone. He suffered unimaginable pain so that our pain will one day come to an end and be no more. He died for us so that for us, death does not need to have victory and it has no more sting. We are not Christians because we're better than the people around us or more moral or smarter or whatever it is. We are Christians because we look at the man in the storm and we say, I believe that he is who he says he is. That I don't need to fear, that I can take courage because of who he is and what he's done for me. But the story doesn't end there. Interestingly, this is really only the middle point. Sometimes we can leave people there in the story where we just say, look, this is Jesus. He is who he says he is. Believe it. You're done. But that's not it. That's only a part of our lives with Jesus. And so as we dig further into the story, we're just at the start of the journey of believing in God. And as I read this week, I realized how much these next few verses kind of show us the cycle that our Christian lives often follow. So let's go ahead and dive in. I think the next few verses here are going to fit into 4 stages of the Christian life. And we're going to find stage 1 in verses 28 and 29. So Jesus gives them his command, and then it says, and Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. Wow! This is amazing what's happening. This is stage 1 of the Christian life. I can do this. I can do it. I love Peter so much. He's one of my favorite biblical characters. Peter has no fear in life whatsoever. Hey, I'm seeing a vision of Jesus and Elijah and Moses. Let's build some tents, guys. He randomly will put his foot in his mouth at these wonderful dramatic moments. Jesus just told me that all of us are going to abandon him at some point. Hey, Jesus. Not me, buddy. Hey, look, it's a mob of people coming to take Jesus away from us. Time to get me some ears. Like he goes out and he just randomly reacts to stuff, but he does it in a way that makes us, he's so wonderful and heartfelt and earnest. And I think it just makes us, he's the character who's constantly making mistakes, but that we just want him to bounce back from it so much. And here, I wouldn't say Peter makes a mistake necessarily. I'm not saying that, but he definitely has an odd response to Jesus' command. If you've heard this story before, in your head's version of this story, does Jesus call Peter to come out on the water with him? Like Jesus is the one who initiates it? Because I think in my head version, that's how it went. And then I thought about it more and more this week, and I'm like, no, this is kind of weird. Like Peter almost says, Jesus, here's what I want to do. Tell me to do it. Like Peter is actually the one driving this interaction. He's like, Jesus, this is the thing I want to do for you. Tell me to do it. And Jesus does. He says, yes, come out to me. And I think Peter's doing it with the best of motives. He wants to demonstrate and confirm his faith. He wants to be with Jesus, even if that means being on the shifting waters in the middle of a storm. He wants to say yes to faith, even if no one else is willing to do it. Peter wants to do great things for Jesus, and there is nothing wrong with that in and of itself. It's a good thing even. In my late teenage years and then kind of early college, there was a wave of popular Christian books, almost like a genre in and of itself, that I would call the Do Crazy Things for Jesus books. There was Radical by David Platt, Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper, Do Hard Things by the Harris Twins. And I think all of them were coming from a great place in their hearts. I read those books and I hear a person whose heart is yelling out, ask me to walk on the water, Jesus. I want to do great things for you. I want to be great for you. And a lot of folks in my generation embraced that advice. Sell everything and move to the third world to share the gospel, whether you have a plan for how to do it or not. Force the gospel into every conversation at about the 13-second mark. Do whatever you have to do in life in order to tell the most people possible about Jesus. And again, don't hear me wrong. None of these are bad in and of themselves. But my generation learned, and I think all of us learn at some point, that there comes a time when I love the way Pete Scazzaro describes this in his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. We've done Bible studies on this before as a church. We'll have another one starting up in the next year or so here. But he describes it this way. He kind of says, as we grow as Christians, there's going to come a time where you hit the wall, where you're trying to do it, and you're trying to work, and you're trying to actively live for God. You're trying to serve and do so on and so forth. And you're going to hit the wall, and you're going to realize that sometimes life is a lot harder than we think it's going to be. Let's read about Peter hitting the wall in verse 30. So he's walking on the water. He came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And we'll pause there. We've hit stage 2 now. I actually can't do it. Help. When we come to Christ, when we find faith in him, we believe that he is who he said he was, and for the first time, we are able to abandon the fear that has held us back. We are able to take courage in him. There is a natural urge to look at our lives and identify all the things that we are now going to do for Jesus. I'm going to dump this bad habit. I'm going to fix this broken relationship. I'm going to work hard to help the people over there. And again, these are all great, good things. And often we can ride the high of that new commitment and purpose for days or months or even years. But I read a book a few years ago about discipling men specifically, but there was a paragraph that just stopped me in my tracks that I really thought applied to all of us and our relationship with God. It read this: "Time and again, I, the person writing the book, have seen men profess faith in Christ, learn the rudiments of practical Christianity, and then mysteriously stall. They stop maturing. 5, 10, or 20 years into their walk with Christ, they are in a condition similar to a year or two after their conversion." I've seen this all the time. Seen this all throughout my life in ministry. And there are many different culprits. There's no one answer to this. I think one of the issues that we need to talk about as a big church in America as a whole is a lack of close spiritual friendships with more mature Christians where we get to watch their lives and learn from them. We live in a disconnected age where we don't live with those other people that we can kind of watch and see hope in the future for us. But here in this passage, we see one of the other big culprits, and that is the wall of first failure. You're doing something big for Jesus. You're pursuing the thing that you think he wants you to be doing in life, and something goes sideways on you. Maybe your changed habit comes back. Your fixed relationship breaks again. Your good work turns into a routine and a responsibility that begins to breed resentment more than satisfaction or gratitude. Maybe you're doing everything you can and it still feels like life is falling apart. You heard God was going to make all things new, but you still feel like the old you. And whether it's the weight of years and years of disappointment or one specific hard circumstance that just breaks, all of a sudden you ram into the wall and it doesn't give. Peter runs into the wall here when he looks at the storm and remembers that it's scary. Sometimes it's that way for us too. Something happens in life and we get reminded all of a sudden, oh, I'm not immune from all the junk out there as a Christian. What's going on? I didn't think it was going to be this way. What do we do now? So let's read verse 31. What do we do as Christians in the moment that allows us to get up and keep going and keep growing and not give up? Verse 31, Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" I'll pause there. I have a plea this morning for this particular verse, which is please, please, please do not read Jesus' words with a frown and a scolding glare. Maybe I'm the only one who needs to hear that. Maybe it's just me, but that's my instinct when I'm reading the story. Remember all the things I said about myself earlier. I'm the one that always has the right answer. I'm the one who always behaves rightly. I'm the person with the internal critic monologue. My first instinct is that Jesus is going to respond to me when I fail the way I respond to me when I fail. And don't read it that way. Read these words with a laugh and with love and with a smile and with a bro hug. One hand reaches out, lifts Peter up, other hand wraps around the back and hugs him. Says, "Peter, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? I'm here. I'm right here. I'm with you." one of my favorite songs by Five Iron Frenzy, the band that I went to concert to that led to the tattoos illustration a few months ago. One of my favorite songs of theirs is called Dandelions. And it starts off with a verse that is talking about a young boy bringing a handful of dandelions to his mother. And it talks about the light in her eyes and her holding them close to her heart. The band sings, "She sees love where anyone else would see weeds." And as the song continues on, it transitions into us thinking of God as our Father, as our parent. And the song says, "Lord, search my heart, create in me something clean. Dandelions, you see flowers in these weeds." Always loved that verse so much because, friends, we are weeds in a lot of ways. Each of us individually as people. I'm a weed in a lot of ways. And there are times in life, there are parts of our lives where we need to remember that, where we need to be humbled by that. We need to acknowledge that and be realistic about it. And we are missing it. We are missing all of it if we just stay there and we don't turn and look at God and whisper, "You see a flower in this weed." When we read Jesus' conversation here with Peter, we should be reading it as someone who sees a flower in the weed, somebody who loves this person and wants the best for him. And if we read it that way, if we kind of shift our brain into that mode, then I think we start seeing some specific details in this verse that are amazing. Like the fact that Jesus is right there with him. It says he immediately reached out his hand and pulled Peter up. Even in the hard times, Jesus is right there with us. Even if it doesn't feel like he's with us, Jesus is right there with us. In fact, sometimes feeling like Jesus isn't right there with us is a sign that he is. That sounds weird, but I think Tim Keller put it beautifully when he said, "A sense of God's absence is a sign of his presence. For to long for the presence of God is in some degree to experience it." What Tim is saying is, without God's love in our hearts, without him helping us to feel our need for him, there will be no longing. There will be no hope. It will just be despair. If there is hope, if there is longing, if there is a desire to see Jesus in the midst of that hardship, that is a sign that he's with us. If it wasn't for that, we would just be trudging on a little more dead every day on the inside until it's true on the outside as well. But that's not how it has to be, because Jesus is with us. And then another detail, he's with us, and he's with us in the storm, not after the storm. He's there with us in it. In verse 31, the storm is still going. The waves are still crashing. The wind is still blowing. Everything is still hard. Being a Christian is not about never having hardship or struggle. You don't get to be a mature Christian by never hitting a wall. Pete Scazzaro, in that book that I mentioned, he talks about this isn't a thing where like you hope to become a mature Christian by avoiding it. He said, you have to hit it over and over and over again. You're going to go through the hard thing. It's going to be tough. And you have to figure out, how do I get through this? And here we start seeing how we get through it. It's like the line in Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. "Why do we fall, Master Bruce?" I'm going to stop trying to do the weird accent. Why do we fall? Alfred the Butler says, "Why do we fall, Master Bruce?" So that we can learn to pick ourselves up. Not a bad moral, but there's a difference for us as Christians. You're almost never going to be the one who picks you up. You're almost never going to be the one who picks you up. When you hit that wall, you don't have it in you to break through. You need Jesus. And in a beautiful blessing, you need other people around you in the storm. Jesus gave us each other. Peter's out there alone. There's no other disciple that goes with him. That's not true for us. We have each other. We have other people who are walking in the storm together, seeking God. Let's close out this morning. I want to read verses 32 and 33. "And when they got into the boat, Peter and Jesus, the wind ceased, And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." In the midst of the storm, hear this well, eventually it ends. Eventually it ends, one way or the other. You will get past the wall, but there's going to be another eventually, and another. We don't stop struggling on this side of paradise, on this side of eternity. So what do we do? What do we do while we're waiting, while we're struggling through it together? What is the thing that can help us through the midst of hardships and in the period of calm seas? The answer is it's worship. Worship, surprisingly, is the thing that pushes us through. What do the disciples say here at the end? They say, "Truly you are the Son of God." This is at its heart what worship is. Worship is keeping our eyes on the things that matter and on the one who matters. Think back through the whole passage. When do the disciples get in trouble? When do things go sideways? It goes sideways when they leave the presence of Jesus, when they don't recognize Jesus, and when they take their eyes off of Jesus. We sang, "Turn our eyes to him" today. Worship is keeping our eyes on Jesus. Throughout the week, worship means putting our eyes on him by praying throughout the day. It's putting our eyes on him by seeking and finding him in his word. It's talking about him with other Christians where we can encourage each other, but it's also talking about him with our friends and family who don't know him yet so that they can come to see Jesus and so that we can turn our own eyes back to him as we talk to others. That's throughout the week. And then it's this. It's us. It's right now. It's us gathering together as Christians to turn our eyes toward the Savior as one. When I was a fresh out of college youth director in Pennsylvania for a few years, I made so many mistakes and I messed up so much. But there was one thing that a number of people thought was a mistake at the time that I look back on now and I go, no, I actually think that was one of the best things that I did. See, I had a bunch of guys in my youth group who really struggled to engage with worship, with singing, with praising the Lord together and seeking him. They were too cool for singing or some such baloney. Anyway, I was like, how do I get these dudes locked in? How do I help them to, well, I picked a maybe unorthodox tactic. I encouraged them to stand in the back row of whatever space we were worshiping in and to do a European soccer line style lock-in swing during worship. Only like 5% of us know what I talk. So in European soccer, sometimes you'll reach your arms around the shoulders of the two people next to you. Everyone locks their hands around each other's upper forearms, and then you swing back and forth. Yeah, you do it while you're doing your team chant or while something's going on athletically. And like I said, there was some skepticism about this particular course of being with these guys. But do you know what I realized? You know what I found out after a few months of watching and realizing? Like, they're actually like 180% more locked in than they used to be on this. You cannot get distracted and look around when the people next to you are locked in too. You can't do it. You're stuck. You're focused on what is ahead when we're together, locking. And I think that's become the analogy, the image that I love for corporate worship, for us all gathering together to worship. We are locking in together right now, and every time we gather in worship, we are locking our arms around each other's shoulders so that we can all encourage each other to lock our eyes on Jesus. Because he has come to us in the storm. He has shown us who he is, and he has invited us to a life with him on the water. Sometimes we're going to start sinking, but we have each other. We have him. In the storm and in the calm, we say together, truly he is the Son of God. Would you pray with me? Lord.